Ukrainian Easter bread, or Pascha, which means Easter, is a slightly sweet egg bread traditionally taken to church on Easter Sunday to be blessed and is an important part of the Ukrainian Easter tradition. To make Ukrainian Easter bread, you will need 3/4 of a cup of scalded milk, 1/4 of a cup of sugar plus 1 additional teaspoon of sugar, 1/4 of a cup of warm water, 2 teaspoons of dry yeast, 3 3/4 cup of flour, 2 beaten eggs, 1/4 of a cup of melted butter, and 3/4 of a teaspoon of fine salt. You want to start by pouring your milk into a saucepan to scald, and once it's scalded, it needs to cool to room temperature. Your next step while your scalded milk is cooling is to add your warm water to a mixing bowl, your teaspoon of sugar, dissolve the sugar in the water, and then sprinkle your yeast over the top. And this needs to sit for about 10 minutes until the yeast blooms. Our yeast has bloomed nicely, so now it's just a matter of pouring in our cooled scalded milk and mixing well. Your next step is to add 1 1/4 cup of flour to the yeast and milk mixture and mix until it's smooth. I've transferred our mixture into a smaller bowl, and now I'm covering this with a piece of plastic wrap, and it needs to just sit until it's light and bubbly. And that could be 30 minutes, it could be 45 minutes, you'll just have to decide. Add your sugar, salt, and butter. Mix it all together, and then your next addition will be your beaten eggs. We've beaten 2 eggs, but you want to add about 1/2 of the mix, about 3/4 of the mixture. You want to hold back some for the egg wash, and stir your egg mixture into this. And our final addition is our 2 1/2 cups of flour. I'm going to hold a little bit back and mix this all together, at which point this will be turned out onto the breadboard. And now it's just a matter of kneading for about 5 minutes until the dough forms a nice smooth ball. So we formed our dough into a beautiful smooth ball, and now we want to place it in a greased bowl, turning the dough so that it's greased on all sides, and now covering it with a sheet of plastic, and this needs to rise until doubled, which will be about an hour. Once your dough has risen, punch it down, turn it out on your breadboard, reshape into a ball, place it back in the bowl, cover, and let it rise again. We've just finished our second rising of the dough, so you want to punch it down again, and then we want to turn this out onto our breadboard. And now you want to cut about 1/3 of this dough off, and then we're just going to kind of put this over to the side. And now it's time to shape our loaves. You'll also need a 7 or 8-inch springform pan that you've greased generously. With your nicely greased springform pan, you want to take your mound of dough, place it in the pan, and push it around until it covers the bottom of the pan. Your extra dough that you've cut, you're going to divide into thirds again. And we're going to bring these into long pieces, and then we'll braid it all together. And now just rolling this out into long strips, you're just going to braid your dough, which will then be laid over the top of the flat dough in the pan. And once you've lifted your dough onto the center of the flat dough, this gets covered and it needs to rise again for another hour. Our beautiful Ukrainian Easter bread is fully risen now, and using the leftover egg that I saved out from earlier in the day, I've added a tablespoon of water to the egg mixture and brushing it on for the egg wash before it goes into our preheated 400-degree oven, where it will bake for 15 minutes, and then I will lower the temperature to 350 degrees and continue baking for an additional 35 minutes. There was a time when I didn't know much about Ukraine or the Ukrainian people, but with the current situation, I can't help but wonder how the people will celebrate Easter this year, if at all. Making this Ukrainian Easter bread is my simple way of honoring the country, the people, and the Ukrainian traditions.